Welcome to Voice of San Diego at home. It's Voice of San Diego at home. This is not the Friday Five. This is the lower cousin, but it's still a fun one, and it's going to be especially fun tonight. I got Andrew Keats coming on to talk about our inaugural poll, the Voice poll. So excited about this. But first, just an update. We have 875,000 people who have voted in the county of San Diego so far. 875,000 people have voted. That's 46% of the electorate. Andy, do you think we'll hit like 75 before Election Day?
Yeah, probably. I mean, what's crazy is it has not particularly shown any signs of slowing down. Like I thought
Right.
it would be like a burst of early ballots and then kind of a wane for people who wanted to wait until Election Day. It hasn't really. I mean, maybe somebody could do a day-by-day analysis and show that it has been slowing down, but it doesn't seem like it has been.
No, and in fact, it feels like there's a bunch piled up there. I voted at one of the drop boxes a while ago, and they still haven't received it. They sent me a note, said we haven't gotten your ballot, and that's like a
Dude, I used a Dropbox.
panic kind of. What?
I used a Dropbox, and I got in like less than 48 hours. I got the notification
Really?
that
Okay,
they received my ballot and it would be counted. It was like I was just like, this is good government. What a
Okay, yeah, but I haven't gotten that yet, and it's causing a type of civic panic I haven't felt before.
yeah.
But if Michael Vu's a fan of the show, Michael, hopefully you can check. Michael Vu, Registrar of Voters, he was on here before. Maybe people can check. They don't need to give me any special service, to be clear. All right, we got a special thing, Andy.
Yeah.
We got a poll. How nice was it? How nice was it to have a poll that was just ours? That nobody was like shopping. Nobody was going to do it instead of us. Nobody was going to write about it. It wasn't somebody else, like other news organizations' poll. It was our poll.
Yes, it was our poll, which also meant it was my phone that was absolutely blowing up in the hour afterwards. It's like all these people trying to work me for more information. I was like, we're not being sneaky with the polls out there. I don't.
Yeah.
We didn't save any information.
Well, we did save some broader information from the poll itself. This was a poll. So we did essentially kind of three, right? We did one about the region in general, with a lot of questions about the crisis we're facing, schools, homelessness, housing, lots of really interesting stuff you're going to find out more about. But then also we did a poll for just the mayor's race. So we pulled out some of those respondents and some others to make sure we had enough for the mayor's race in the city of San Diego, and to make sure also a separate one so that we could make sure we had enough to gauge the District 3 county supervisor race, which is going to determine the future of the county. Andy, you handled the story about the mayor's race. Do you want to give us the basics?
Yeah, basics are that Assemblyman Todd Gloria, holds a slim lead, a 4-point lead. 36% of likely voters favor him. 32% of likely voters favor Councilwoman Barbara Bree, and 32% of voters remained undecided. The poll was conducted between October 8th and October 22nd. So it is entirely possible that people have started making their decisions, particularly those people who might have been captured on the early end of the poll may have started making decisions by now. But it shows, I think it passes the smell test in that it's a small lead for Todd Gloria, by no means a comfortable lead, and with a huge amount of undecided voters, so much so that the race could absolutely go either way.
Yeah, I agree. And there was some interesting actual other breakdown. So let's pull up this chart. We had as far as the mayor's race goes, we had Todd Gloria versus Barbara. Gloria had a 30-point lead among voters who described themselves as liberal, 55% to 22%, while those who said they were conservative favor Bree by a similar margin. This is a chart of the breakdown as it relates to the party, so a little bit of a different kind of breakdown. But essentially, we had been talking about Barbara Bree perhaps taking some of that conservative support, aiming for it for her race for mayor, and maybe it's coming together.
Yeah, I think so. it is an interesting race dynamic in that it's two Democrats. Now, the Todd Gloria campaign has worked very hard, and I think to moderate success, to brand Barbara Bree as the conservative in the race. But the difference between an actual Republican in the race being the person on the right and a Democrat who's being branded as the conservative is that she's not a Republican. She
Right.
like no amount of messaging will ever change the fact that she is a registered Democrat. She has been in office as a Democrat, and so she's going to get a larger percent of the Democratic vote than a Republican who's trying to essentially run the same electoral strategy, which is okay, Todd gets the left, let's take everything to his right.
Yeah.
Even in a world where there's more Democrats than Republicans, we could still win that way if we basically, the strategy for her campaign is keep Todd's margins down with Democrats, win all the right-leaning independents, and then consolidate Republicans. And that's basically what she's done, and that's why the race is close. Here's another way that I would describe the race. Among Democrats, so here are the numbers that you just had up on the screen. Among Democrats, 51% favor Gloria, about half that many, 23% favor Barbara Bree, and a quarter are undecided. Among independents, Bree, in that case, has a small edge. 34% favor Bree, 29% favor Gloria, so that it's very tight there, but Bree does have an edge, and 36% are undecided. And then the inverse of the Democratic number, Republicans favor Bree 47%, by 47%, and 15% favor Todd Gloria. And then there are still a large number of undecideds. So that race is breaking down about the way you would have guessed in a post-election analysis, post-election referring back to March, that is. Now, the big question that I have when you look at these numbers is, well, who are these undecideds? Who are these 30% of voters who essentially hold the outcome in their hands? A 4% lead is not enough for Gloria, is not enough to not worry about how those undecideds are going to break.
Right.
So those undecided voters are 38% of them are Democrats, 34% of them are independents, and 26% of them are Republicans. So there's still a decent decent case for optimism for Todd in there, because Democrats remain the largest share even among the undecideds, and he is winning Democrats 2-1 over Bree. Right?
Yeah, he's clearly identifying better with Democrats and and the Democratic Party endorsed him and can use that to communicate to their members.
Or maybe here's a simple way of saying it. Democratic voters are getting the message that Todd is the Democrat in the race, as far as the party's concerned, as far as Labor's concerned, as far as the coalition that supports him is concerned. That it's one thing for that to be the case in official endorsements and the so-called smoky back rooms, but Democrats are getting that message. 51% of them support Todd, so that's getting through. But the problem is, 38% of undecideds are Democrats. Well, 47% of all voters are Democrats. So there's among the remaining people who are up for grabs, a much smaller share of them are the Democrats that he expects to do well with. Even if they're the largest share of remaining voters, it's a smaller share than the poll as a whole. And the likely voters as a whole, among that group, he only has a 4% lead. So and then 34% of undecideds are independents. They're not members of either party, which doesn't mean that they don't tend left or right. It just means that they have not chosen to affiliate themselves with a party. And then a quarter are Republicans, a small increase from the overall population, or the overall likely voter universe. So Todd has a slim lead, but the share of undecideds remaining favors him less than the likely voter universe as a whole favors him. All of this to say, it's a competitive race. It's a toss-up race.
Yeah, it really is. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Those first numbers come out. So just some background, like they do count the ballots in San Diego County as they come in early before the polls close, so that when those polls close, there will be a an initial result presented, I think, a little more cleanly this year from some of the announcements I saw. Did you see that? They're going to take out the polling
Precincts.
station precinct thing. Yeah,
That's me.
I
That's
know.
impact.
I know. Congrats.
Can we put that in
Uh,
our impact report?
sure.
I had a For anybody who's watching, all six of you out there watching Scott's show, I had a viral tweet saying like we need to get rid of this precincts reporting number because it does mean something. The
Yeah.
election officials that use it have a very specific, discrete, and reasonable meaning for it, but no one thinks it means that.
Yeah.
And
So when they see 100% of precincts reporting, they were always assuming like, oh, it's all counted. But
yeah,
no, no, no. There was still a ton of provisional mail-in ballots.
yes, and often and often ballots even from those precincts that had reported. So it just never meant what people thought it meant, and reporters screwed it up all the time. It's not
Yeah.
even like trying to be like a know-it-all about this. Like every election, you see some sort of bad reporting that gets that wrong. And so I think one good way to handle that is to stop putting a number that causes so much confusion in front of people.
Yeah. We have an insider, Julie Randolph, who asked if we're going to do Golden Hall this year. Uh, nah, they're not going
No.
to gather a bunch of people indoor downtown.
In fact, we are gonna though get on a Zoom call together, and everyone's gonna share their stress dreams about in March. We all gathered in
right.
large open air indoor environment,
Yeah.
hundreds of people, and all shook hands and slapped, and then moved to other indoor groups of parties.
I
Man,
didn't even know what the word aerosol meant.
I know, I know, and man,
Now we do.
that was like 10 days before
I
Tom Hanks.
remember before
Yeah.
Tom Hanks
But
Day.
so to your question, Julie, no, they're not doing that. I think I'm starting to hear from campaigns and parties about some sort of digital approximation of some of the election night traditions. So I think they're going to set up like a virtual space where candidates can give their concession speeches, their victory speeches, their we're going to stay up all night until every vote is counted, or looks like it's going to be a long night, but we're feeling great. And then they do the thumbs thing, like we'll do all that on Zoom this year, I think.
Yeah, that'll be
Although
fun.
the Republican Party is holding a election night viewing party at a hotel,
Really?
right? Isn't
No, they
that?
did a debate party.
I think there was also one for election night.
Was there? Okay.
I think so.
Well, wear a mask, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did you want to have any other points about the mayor's race poll that you wanted to get into before we talk about a couple other things?
We'll keep it simple. I think that was numbers don't necessarily translate well on audio medium.
I thought you did all right, though. I thought that was good.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Another poll we did was the race between Tara Lawson Remer and Kristen Gaspar. Kristen Gaspar is the incumbent in District 3 of the county board of supervisors. The county has 5 supervisors. The future of the county is very clearly hinging on this race. Democrats take over, they take it in a much more left progressive fashion. If the Republicans maintain it, it could be more conservative than ever, considering some incumbents being replaced with more, maybe more ideological conservatives. So there is, I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, Diane Jacob and Greg Cox are no one's idea of like movement conservatives.
No. And in fact, they've been the reason that Nathan Fletcher has had so much success on the county board of supervisors as the lone Democrat. So we did the race, Kristen Gaspar versus Tara Lawson Remer. We tested that. It was a little bit more lopsided. 42% of likely voters said that they supported Tara Lawson Remer, the Democrat, for the seat. And 31% said they supported the incumbent Gaspar. This was an interview of 430 likely voters within that District 3 county supervisor race. So that's the supervisor district, goes like Encinitas all the way
to Escondido.
Yeah, over to Escondido. So
Carmel Valley.
but it's not Oceanside. So like, doesn't Desmond
Yeah.
have that section, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So that was a little bit more clear, and I can't help but think back, Andy, to the Lori Zaff race, 2018, right?
Hmm.
She's running, and there she has no connection to Trump of any significance other than that she's with party, right?
Well, do you remember what the fatal connection was
Yeah, that she went to a inaugural party for him. Like there was a
in
party to
like
celebrate
Rancho
his
Santa Fe?
inauguration. Yeah, and she
Yeah,
went to it. That was their like that was the like Trump connection.
yeah. I mean, can you imagine like the Oppo researchers when they found like a little snippet in the Rancho Santa Fe community paper that Lori Zaff had attended
Yeah, nailed
party, and
it.
they were like, "We got it. All right, let's go.
Celebrating Trump's
Print the mailers."
yeah,
Yeah.
celebrating
I mean,
Trump.
like not. We don't need to spend too much time on 2018. No incumbent city council member had lost re-election since 1992.
Yeah.
As I put it in my race coverage going into that, like a week before election day, no one had lost, no incumbent city council member had lost an election since House Party 2 was in theaters.
Yes.
And Lori Zaff didn't just lose, she got creamed. She got
15 points, right?
I mean, yeah, I don't even remember because I stopped watching the late returns come in at a certain because it was so, but it was well over 10 points. She got
And for no other, there was no like major
no
like
scandal.
standout
No.
recall effort or scandal, or she hadn't done anything, and just tying her to Trump in that tenuous way. Well, Kristen Gaspar, it's much easier to tie her. I remember election night 2016, she acknowledged that she supported him, and then she went to visit him. She went to visit him several times. She spoke out along some of the same lines, and that turns out to have been a giant deal. It feels like that's all the campaign against her is about, maybe mostly, but pretty much all. And it seems to be having the consequence on what at least these voters told us.
We should
We all
add pretty similar districts here as
Yes.
well. A somewhat, upper income coastal Democrat leaning as far as registration district in Lori Zaff's case in the city council second district, and in this case in the county supervisorial third district. So the dynamic is not a stretch.
Yeah. Let's pull up the by-party numbers on that. So we have
So the overall numbers, supervisors, we had Tara Lawson Raymer 42,
right.
Gasper 31, and undecided was 27.
So still a lot of undecideds. What's your take, by the way, on the undecideds? I guess down ballot races traditionally have a lot of undecideds until the end. It seems like it's just part of local politics.
Yeah, and I think you could I think it's a reminder in local politics that most people don't know who their city council member is. Well, maybe not most people. Many people don't know who their city council member is, let alone who they're going to vote for in an election between them. And that's more true the further you go down the ballot. And so maybe shouldn't be a surprise. Now I think you could push those undecideds. You could keep those undecideds on the line a little bit longer and say, if I told you X, Y, and Z about this person and X, Y, and Z about this person, what would you decide? Or if you had to choose, what would you decide? And so, those undecideds probably do have a tendency, but I think it's good practice if they are genuinely undecided, and if the race still has time to go, let them be undecided.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Let's pull up.
So one point just
Yeah.
to underline that, Jesse Marks, who wrote the story on the supervisors polling numbers, one thing he pointed out was that so Democrats outnumber Republicans in this district in the first place, but in addition to that, 17% of Republicans are voting for the Democrat Tara Lawson Reamer. and only 11% of Democrats are voting for the incumbent Kristen Gaspar. Now you might say, well, that doesn't seem like a huge delta, but the thing is, Gaspar is the incumbent. Gaspar is the person who had an opportunity to build a relationship with these constituents and say, well, I don't love Donald Trump. I don't love the Republican Party, but it seems like they're doing good work over there at the county. It seems like their response to COVID-19 was appropriate at the city council level to say, it seems like they're getting they got the pothole patched up in front of my house. All of these little local things that don't fit in a partisan box are opportunities to cement yourself with the incumbency effect. And it looks like the opposite is happening here with Kristen Gaspar, where even though she's the incumbent, she is underperforming with the opposing party relative to a newcomer who has never held elected office.
This one was really interesting to me. We did a crosstab on another question we asked, which was about the direction of the county.
Mm-hmm.
And the poll found that voters who think that the county is headed in the wrong direction, both in the pandemic and in general, say they're likely to vote for Gaspar. And voters who think that the county is headed in the right direction said they're likely to vote for Lawson Reamer, which is like kind of flipped, right? Because Gaspar is the incumbent county supervisor. So if you think the county is heading in the wrong direction,
it's a change election. You want to change the person who represents you on that body that is going the wrong way.
And the only thing I can think with that is that what's happening is that Lawson Reamer is capturing this sense that like the county is headed in a more progressive direction, and they want that to continue, I guess. And that people who are objecting to that want Gaspar to like keep fighting it. That's the only way I can square it, or else they just don't know.
Well, I think they just don't know is a viable answer for any question about local government. I could think of two other ways, and there's probably some overlap between all of these things we're saying. But one is, you know how Donald Trump has successfully managed to convince people that he's like a bystander to the government over which he has control?
Yes.
It seems like Gaspar has managed to pull something similar, where like the county is heading in the wrong direction, but that is because it is acting against her will.
Yes.
And that she is not responsible for these bad decisions that the county is making, because if she had say, they would be doing different things anyway.
Exactly. And this is,
they're not holding her accountable for the government that they don't like because they don't think she's actually a part of it.
Which is like also how like this conversation about Nathan Fletcher, existing county supervisor, has gone. She has blamed him for the direction in many ways that the county's going in, when he's like one of 5 board members in the minority party, and he's not in. So anything that he's influencing is purely because he's convincing them, or it's because they've empowered him. And so it's like it's like you know who else does this in politics? Bill de Blasio in New York City. He's always like, the police are doing this or whatever, like in opposition to them, when he's their boss. He's their literal boss.
Running against the government that you run.
Right.
Now, this was a dynamic that's actually repeated in the mayor's race. People
really?
The city is going in the right direction overwhelmingly support Todd Gloria. People who think the city's going in the wrong direction overwhelmingly support Barbara Bree.
That's fascinating. That's exactly right. Like, that's the same dynamic. She's on the city council now. He's not. He's in Sacramento.
Yes, and now it's just like it's sort of, I think, in my poll, in my story, I spoke to a bunch of supporters from both candidates and talked to them, a bit outside the numbers, what they think this race says about how local politics are developing, and what Genevieve Jones-Wright, who ran for district attorney in 2018, said was, this is a status quo versus establishment, or a status quo versus grassroots race, establishment versus anti-establishment. And if you adopt that framing, then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That if Barbara Bree is the anti-establishment candidate, the one who's trying to shake up City Hall, and that has largely been the message of her campaign,
Uh-huh.
um,
Yeah,
then
she's literally run against the mayor, it feels like.
yes, yeah. I mean, it's like she's done this two-step where she's running against Kevin Faulconer as if he's up for re-election again, which he isn't. But then you kind of just like yada 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 over the, and Todd Gloria essentially represents a third term of Kevin Faulconer. Never mind that they're in a different party. Never mind that when Todd Gloria was on the city council, he didn't actually get along with Kevin Faulconer all that well. In fact, they feuded quite a bit when he was on the city council and Faulconer was the mayor. But setting all those things aside, the dynamic that she has set up around the race is that she represents a change to City Hall. And that, again, seems to be a message that's getting through to voters, if you believe what they told our pollsters.
Yeah. Well, there was another post we did today. This was from Sarah Libby. This is one of many. So we didn't just test, we wanted to test a bunch of issues. We just decided to add the county supervisor race and the mayor's race. But we really wanted to ask a bunch of other questions about our society right now, about local government. One of them that we asked was basically whether respondents supported taking a significant amount of funds that it's currently heading to police departments and sheriff's department and instead using them for mental health services, substance abuse treatment, job training. So 41 or 49% said they wanted that. 41% said they opposed it and 10% weren't sure. Now, this was for the whole county of San Diego. We did 712 county residents with a proportional number of demographic representatives, and it was a really interesting survey. Basically there wasn't a majority, but it was a plurality. More people wanted to see a change like that. And then there was some really interesting crosstabs. The majority of women and people of color wanted to see that kind of reallocation, and those who identified as Democrats or independents did. But those who identified as Republicans, like, overwhelmingly opposed that, like, which isn't a surprise, but just a really interesting question.
Yeah, another thing that I thought was really interesting about that question within the crosstabs is the way voters have a sense, a way of like sorting themselves out, even in ways that are not being voiced by the campaigns at all, but that they discern things on their own and make their own decisions, basically. And one thing that consultants say to me all the time, I think readers might have like a very cynical view about the way reporters and consultants talk about voters, like very easily manipulatable rubes. And like one thing that consultants often tell me about voters is that like they sniff out things that are just wrong, that that they sniff out all kinds of things, and that there's only so much you can run with before they'll call you on it. And I think this is sort of another example, not necessarily of that, but just of voters sort of being able to figure things out on their own, which is that both Todd Gloria and Barbara Bree have said that they do not support defunding the police. Defunding the police, in this case, we asked the question as, do you support reallocating some money currently sent to police departments for social services, right? Now, asked more generally about the defund movement, because in the summer that was sort of how activists were describing themselves in asking the city council to do some reallocation just like this. Both Todd Gloria and Barbara Bree, you can see my dog Bertha there in the background, said that they do not support that. Now, they also both said that there might be some things on the margins that they support, but they just didn't have different responses to these questions when asked. And yet voters who support reallocating police funding overwhelmingly support Todd Gloria. And voters who do not support reallocating police funding overwhelmingly support Barbara Bree. So it's like, even when the candidates are saying the very same thing in response to a very direct question, on that same question, voters sort themselves in a specific way, a repeatable way.
That's fascinating. It's like, Yeah, it's like they're just taking cues from who they support more broadly, maybe like more progressives, liberals support Todd and assume that or something.
And then it flows downwards from there. More Republicans support Barbara, so they just,
Right,
that it's a byproduct of these other things that are driving the race more generally.
right.
But it's nonetheless very interesting, I think.
Yeah. So we have a ton of here's just an image of that. I just got sent. Sorry, Megan's out of town, so I don't have the border set up like I usually do. Do you favor or oppose taking a significant amount of funds going to local police departments and the county sheriffs and instead using them for other programs? And you can see that strongly favor and somewhat favor almost gets to that 50%, and then somewhat and strongly oppose is another just significant block. I don't think it's at all a given that that sort of reallocation should occur based on any data like that. But it was an interesting, just question that people, and I think even police groups have argued, police unions have argued like we shouldn't do a lot of the things we're doing. Like we would support, but it shouldn't be characterized as necessarily just defund or not defund.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one to suss out how this question might have gone over in a world in which the rhetoric didn't get so amped up over the summer, about like defund, which suggests like zeroing out police budgets as opposed to like generally reallocating a minority of the budget. Because yeah, over the years, one of the things we've heard from police groups is that that they don't want to be doing first contacts with homeless people, and that they don't feel that that's the best use of their time. And yet, if you actually make a budget proposition around that, or around that question, suddenly that it sort of seems
Yeah.
to resort itself. But yeah, it's not a new idea, and it wasn't an idea that was only opposed by the far left. It sort of just became cast in those terms during the situation that we went through earlier this year. And so I think voters are picking up on that as well, and that they're kind of hurting themselves, based on the way it's been responded to by institutions.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of other questions. I saw a comment come up about the border question there. You might have seen in the larger poll about the county race or the mayor's race, one of these other questions in there. Just a note of caution on that, and maybe we should have cleaned up the actual documents we posted. But those are just the results from that particular sample. So either District 3 in the county supervisor race or the city race might be the documents you saw on the site. But we do have the full regional poll that we're going to start presenting content from now, that has the full 712 respondents with all of the questions, and we'll start rolling that out. And the police funding one was the one that we just rolled out. But I agree, we could have broken down the question about whether to reopen the border or whether residents support reopening the border into like actual reasons why they might be not at all worried about immigration or commerce, but mostly worried about COVID and supporting, keeping the border closed. It might be the very opposite. So that's definitely something we could have looked into more, but we'll have those results and a breakdown of them coming up. So stoked to go through these numbers. I was enjoying going through some of the crosstabs today with the team, and some really interesting numbers about housing, homelessness, how much people are worried. Just a note, there were two things that residents were most worried about. We asked about the both health impacts of COVID-19 and the economic impacts of the pandemic, and then and whether they were extremely or very whatever worried about that. Uh, Overwhelmingly, the economic impacts stood out, and then the second biggest worry that people have in the county right now, housing, the cost of housing. And then homelessness was right up there too. So we're going to have some great data on that, and more to come. And so, Andy, appreciate your breakdown. I'm sure we'll have more for the politics report, and then for the podcast, we're going to draft our favorite races to watch for election night, and then we'll have our contest too, our regular pick the races contest. We never had to pay up on the other one because we weren't allowed to have lunch.
It's true. It's accurate.
All right, guys. Let us know if you have any questions. We can check these questions later. Andy, thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you again with the podcast on Friday 5 on Friday. Cheers.
Sounds good.